Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 208. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this episode and this channel where all we do is talk and discuss movies. I hope you all are having a great week so far. We are back to a normal schedule, back with another new movie that we're going to be talking about this week. So I am super pumped. Summer's still going on. It's still August. I know that a lot of folks are going back into school and now we're starting to get ready for that fall season, but we still got a couple of movies left in the summer. So make sure to check out the Timeless Movie Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. That way you can hear my thoughts, my opinions, and you can also interact with us about any of your opinions on some of these movies. Speaking of opinions and giving your thoughts, if you haven't listened or had a chance to check out some of our prior episodes, please go to the Timeless Movie Podcast. Check out our last episode. I went solo and talked all about Spider-Man Brand New Day. I was a week late to that movie, but it didn't matter. Yeah, I still had a great time. Probably some of the best Spider-Man action that I've seen, at least in my opinion. But I still want to interact with you guys. What did you think about Spider-Man Brand New Day? Did you enjoy it? Is it your favorite Tom Holland Spider-Man? Is it your favorite Spider-Man movie of all time? Well, I'd love to hear that as well. So please drop it in the comments of that respective episode. Also, if you could do me a huge favor, please send me any emails of your thoughts and opinions on any recent movies that you've had a chance to check out. The email for the Timeless Movie Podcast is timelessmoviepod@gmail.com. Please, the email is open. I would love to hear your guys' opinions and any suggestions that you have for the podcast as well. All right, let's go ahead now and dive into this week's new movie in which we are talking about The End of Oak Street, this new film from Warner Brothers. It has dinosaurs. It has a couple of big name actors. As soon as I saw dinosaurs, I was all in. And I saw the trailer for this a couple months ago and I'm intrigued. I am one that, although we have such a great movie in Jurassic Park that really defined what a great dinosaur movie could be, anytime there is a new movie that includes dinosaurs and tries to maybe give a different type of perspective or show them or highlight different dinosaurs, I'm all in. I want to see what a different type of idea that people can come up with when it comes to dinosaurs. And so, End of Oak Street has dinosaurs. I wanted to check it out, but there's a couple of other things that made me interested in it as well. So, why don't we go ahead and dive into the non-spoiler section? That way I can tell you a little bit about the director, the actors that come out in it, and a little synopsis of the film. All right, The End of Oak Street is written and directed by David Robert Mitchell. If you aren't aware, David Robert Mitchell has made two films, one of them called It Follows, and the other one called Under the Silver Lake. I unfortunately haven't seen those two films, but hopefully over the next couple months when I have a chance, I'll be able to check those out. But in this film, David Robert Mitchell has a couple of big name actors, two of them to be precise. First one is Anne Hathaway, the other is Ewan McGregor, but they're also joined by new actors Maisie Stella and Christian Convery. Now, in The End of Oak Street, what the heck happens here? Why are there dinosaurs? Where are they? What's going on in this whole premise of this movie? I'm not going to spoil the entire thing, but let me give you an idea of what takes place in this story. So, in The End of Oak Street, we are introduced to the Platt family. The Platt family includes Denise, played by Anne Hathaway, Greg, played by Ewan McGregor. You have Audrey, played by Maisie Stella, and Brian, played by Christian Convery. Now, they are presented as the perfect family. There's even a neighbor that tells them that exact same statement, just because on the outside, it looks like everything is going by smoothly. However, after you start meeting each of the characters, you start noticing that each one has some type of issue going on, some type of struggle, maybe even marital problems between Denise and Greg. However, no issue that each of the family members is facing is as big as the next one that they are about to encounter. And what is that issue? Well, one day the family wakes up and they realize that their entire town has been transported to the prehistoric times. How the heck did they get there? Who did this? Why was it them? Well, I'm not going to be able to answer that here in the non spoiler section, so you'll have to wait for the spoiler section for me to give that answer. However, one answer that I can give you is my overall thoughts about this movie. Okay, after leaving the theater, watching The End of Oak Street, I thought this movie was pretty good. It didn't blow me away, and again, it's always so tough, right? Because I just mentioned it a couple minutes ago, where we have Jurassic Park. That is the bar when it comes to any type of dinosaur movie, and it's very hard to try to top that. And it's also hard as an audience member not to compare because anytime a dinosaur appears, anytime a dinosaur roars, anytime there is any kind of inclusion of some type of dinosaur in live action, your immediate thought, if you've seen Jurassic Park, is, well, I've seen that already, right? I've seen this and it's already just drilled into my head. I'm always going to know the sound of a T Rex. And so I tried not to compare as much and instead just try to enjoy the film for what it was. It was just like a specific type of adventure where a family just tries to survive. Now, I thought the movie had some really cool dinosaur action. I like that they actually utilized the design of the dinosaurs a little bit differently than Jurassic Park. This representation of the dinosaurs seemed to be a little bit more accurate. You saw a couple dinosaurs with feathers. You saw a lot more hair on these dinosaurs. You didn't hear the typical roars that we have in other dinosaur films that sometimes just typically copy the same sounds that come out in Jurassic Park because that has just become the universal sound. But overall, I liked the design of the dinosaurs. I liked how they all looked. And then visually, I thought from an effects perspective, they all looked pretty good. Like there wasn't anything that was like an uncanny valley type of feeling where it takes you out of the movie. I was always invested, and there was a lot more brutality when it came to these dinosaurs and how they would just hunt down some of the people in this town where the Platt family lives. Now, what really stood out to me about watching this movie was that it was very unintentionally funny, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is there was a lot of scenes and how they shot these scenes or how they framed certain aspects where it just made me laugh. There's a couple moments, and again, I'm not going to spoil it here, but there was a couple scenes where me and my brother, who went to go watch it with me, we were just dying laughing because of what was going on, how cheesy it looked, or just the ridiculousness of a certain scene and how the characters sometimes would interact with the dinosaurs. Now, I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if that was on purpose to make the audience laugh. And this kind of goes into a little bit of maybe a slight con of the movie is I actually wish they would have gone all in on the comedy because some of the scenes just really made me laugh. But again, I don't know if that was because it was intended. I don't know if that was like the punchline that they were trying to set up or they were just trying to make something very thrilling. In my eyes, because we have Jurassic Park, which is an incredible movie that involves dinosaurs, I think that movies moving forward, whenever they include dinosaurs, I think we got to stop making it feel like an adventure. We can't make it feel like a survival because we have that already. What we need to do is we need to go in a hard zag. Let's not go down that adventure route. Let's go down the route of a comedy, a horror, some other type of genre that we have not seen that includes dinosaurs. So I feel like the end of Oak Street actually should have gone more down the comedy route because there was already a couple scenes that just made me laugh. Would have loved if it would have just pushed that even further, cross the line, and make it funny. Not about the dinosaurs themselves, but the characters in this moment. How ridiculous is it that the town has been transported and like, what more can you think about other than like this is just a ridiculous situation? So let's go into that ridiculousness. Let's stay in that kind of vibe. But again, the movie didn't do that. It only had a couple of these types of moments that I don't know if they were intentional or not. But again, that was my thoughts after I left the theater. I thought there was good dinosaur action. I liked the visual effects. The movie felt exciting and it had these kind of jump scare moments. I forgot to mention performances were really good as well. For me, I think what holds it back is I think the movie just, when it comes to its narrative, the whole idea of this town being transported seems a little ridiculous. Also, a little bit of cheesy lines. I know that the movie kind of takes place in the 80s, but I don't know. I felt like the writing could have been a little bit more improved on that side, but again, that's kind of what holds it back. And also, just me in my mind, because I was laughing already in certain moments. Let's just push this to a comedy. Let's just go all out. Let's just make this a funny time with dinosaurs. Maybe other people wouldn't have appreciated that, but at this point, again, I don't think anything is going to really touch some of the films like Jurassic Park. But those are my overall non-spoiler thoughts. Let's move into the next segment, which is, should you check this movie out in theaters? In my opinion, I would say that this movie is not a requirement to watch in theaters. I would say that this is a really good streaming movie. So again, it's not something that I'm saying that you should skip. I actually think you should still check it out because, like I mentioned before, there's still good stuff in the movie. There's concepts about a couple and how they're dealing with their marital problems. You get a family, and every single individual is dealing with something that they just find very tricky to explain to their family members. There is great dinosaur action. Again, everything is brutal. Everything is, you see a little bit of that savagery of these dinosaurs and how dangerous they can be. So there is good stuff in there. I just, to me, I feel like the story just kind of lets it down just a little bit. So I would say, again, still a movie you should check out, but maybe wait for streaming. That way you can actually, experience it in your home, enjoy it, and not feel like you were expecting something when you went to the theaters and you ended up coming out very disappointed. So those are my thoughts in regards to whether you should check out The End of Oak Street. All right, I think this is a great segue to start moving into the spoiler section of the Timeless Movie Podcast. But before we do that, please jump out of the podcast now because I don't want to spoil anything about this movie, especially if you haven't checked it out. So if you do plan to watch The End of Oak Street, jump out of the podcast, watch the movie, then come back and please drop in your comments, your thoughts. Send me an email, timelessmoviepod@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts about your opinions and your experience of watching The End of Oak Street. Is there things that you really liked and that you just want to call out? Is there things that maybe you didn't appreciate and you're saying, yeah, maybe they shouldn't have gone down this route? Again, I would love to know your guys' opinions. That way we can just continue to interact and talk about this movie. All right, hopefully that's enough of a break before we now jump into spoilers. So again, final warning, spoilers will start right now. Let me get the big one out of the way, which is, how the heck does this family, this town, end up getting transported to the prehistoric times? Why do dinosaurs all of a sudden appear? Well, in the beginning of the movie, they actually have a specific scene where you can hear a radio, and there's a specific radio host talking about solar flares that are hitting the earth at this time. And you kind of just hear that little bit of it, but they don't explain some of the consequences or some of the fallout that could impact the earth because of these solar flares. And what happens on one night is that after there's a huge rain and thunderstorm, there is an actual wormhole that opens up. And the wormhole, I guess, is represented that this is the cause of these solar flares. And these wormholes end up connecting from one point in time to another. And so essentially what happens is that the town that the Platt family lives, it gets transported to prehistoric times. And that land that was there before is from prehistoric times, in the 80s now. And so they basically swap places. That was essentially the explanation for why this family was transported to another land, another point in time. Uh, I don't know why it was the wormhole was the size of the entire city. I don't know why it was that the wormholes would appear at multiple different points at people's houses. None of that was really explained. Again, that kind of goes into the sci-fi nature of this film, is that, hey, these are just very broad and huge ideas. We can't really explain it all just because wormholes aren't real as of today, right now, or not something that we can explain all the way through. So again, that was how the family ended up going to this time where there were dinosaurs. Um, Take it how you will. Some people will buy into it and they'll suspend their disbelief. Some people will just continue to question, and that's totally fair. I tried to accept it as much as I could, but there are a couple questions that I had, but we'll get to that in the second half of this spoiler section. Let me start off with some of the good things that I want to just kind of spoil now that I don't have to worry about, messing with any kind of scenes that you guys maybe have not watched or seen. Or again, for anybody out there, if you're still here, You already had your warning. We're going into spoilers, but the first thing that I want to call out about what worked about this movie is the music and the score that played. I thought it was a great sound that they were able to include and really integrate within this film. It was by Michael Giacchino. He is one of my favorite composers right now. Other than Ludwig and Daniel Pemberton, Michael Giacchino is up there. He has such great range when it comes to his film scores. He's made music for, I believe he's made for The Incredibles, for The Batman, for all of the four Tom Holland Spider-Man films. He just has this really great touch of this sound like that is very either fantastical, very dark. He's able to really switch it up, and he doesn't have that kind of tell that other composers might have in their sound. But Michael Giacchino ends up making the score and the music for this film of End of Oak Street. And I don't know, I really enjoyed the way that he was able to incorporate the sounds as things would get a little bit more intense. Whenever there was a dinosaur, whenever there was action, you could feel the pace of the music just pick up depending on what a character was doing. But in those very quiet and very vulnerable moments, it kind of slows down. It's able to kind of let you breathe with the characters and give you that sense of you're there with them as they're trying to process why there's a dinosaur outside their house. And it also, and this is not a knock on Michael Giacchino, but I think it's just because of the visual aspect of what we're watching on screen. These dinosaurs, this family running away from them. The score reminds me a lot of John Williams. It has that John Williams-esque type of touch. It reminds me of scores like from Jurassic Park or E.T. Very fantastical, very out there with like how loud the music can get, but then eventually, again, comes right back down at a grounded level. So overall, I thought the music was just awesome by Michael Giacchino. No surprise, he's just been killing it. He's already got back-to-back movies for me where he's developed a really great score. So we'll see maybe by the end of the year if he has the best score. Me and my brother usually like to kind of call out what our favorite musical scores were for these films. So maybe we'll see Michael Giacchino on that list. But that was the first thing I wanted to call out. All right, second thing I want to call out about what worked for me in this movie was Anne Hathaway. She just killed it per usual in these roles. I think a lot of people are overlooking Anne Hathaway just a little bit. I wouldn't say everybody, maybe just a minority, but you have people talking about Zendaya, Robert Pattinson. They're coming out in 4 or 5 movies. They're the ones that are all over the place. Anne Hathaway is in the same amount of movies. She had a great performance in End of Oak Street. She had a great performance in The Odyssey. She was fun in Devil Wears Prada 2. I haven't seen Mother Mary, but I'm pretty sure she did great in that. She has one more movie coming out in the fall with Dakota Johnson and Josh Hartnett. She is on a roll. And so I feel like people aren't realizing that Anne Hathaway is there for some of the best performances so far this year. And in End of Oak Street, it's no different. She is able to have this believable reaction whenever she encounters a dinosaur. Of all the actors that were in the film, her reactions were the one I believed the most. But it wasn't just because she was frightened or scared. It's also her character. Her character was actually the core of the Platt family. She was really the one that led them. She was the one that was strong enough to be real with her children and not give them false hope, not give them the idea that, don't worry, kids, we're going to make it. No, she would tell them, like, hey, I don't know the answer. I don't know what's going on. And that's believable. That's real. So, sometimes we have this really kind of a glossy type of a view when we have these relationships between our kids and their parents. And the parents usually they try to lie and not to do it in a very in an evil way, but more so just to make sure that the child stays innocent. And in this actual film, Denise, again, I really appreciated that she just kept it real with her kids. She wanted them to be protected. She was going to do everything she could. And you see that through Anne Hathaway's performance about how much she was willing to just put herself in front of her kids just to make sure that they were safe. She was always wanting to know where they were, but she was never going to give them that idea that, hey, don't worry, there's going to be a way out of there. And that was a really good contrast to Ewan McGregor's character. I thought he did pretty good in regards to playing this character of Greg, he was more of the character that was very hopeful. He actually would tell the kids, "Hey, don't worry, guys. There's going to be a way out of this." And I kind of related to that character because I feel like that's how I am, and that's how I would be as a parent. As much as I feel like I would want to be more of that, very direct, very realist type of an approach, I feel like I am more of the hopeful one where I'm not going to think of the negative. I got to think of the positive. But the dynamic of Denise and Greg together, I thought was really cool. And I think that comparison also elevated for me Anne Hathaway's performance because after you see her interact with Greg, her husband, you get the sense that okay, she's actually the one that has to really save this family. She's going to be the one that'll have to make the hard decision, but is going to keep having the family move forward. So that whole performance by Anne Hathaway was freaking awesome. There was also concepts that they kind of included for each family. I kind of mentioned this in the non-spoiler section, but every family member kind of had their own little issue internally, whether it was, them dealing with the actions that they've done in the past, whether it was Greg who lost his job and he doesn't want to tell his wife. You have Denise who is trying to write a book, and in her books, it's almost like her giving her actual feelings of wanting to leave the family, even though that's not what she's saying. But through her book, that's what it sounds like. It's like sounds like she wants to escape, and all this stuff. I really enjoyed those pieces of it. Of every family member had something going on, just like any other person in the world, right? Everybody's got something in the back of their mind that they're thinking about, that they're trying to decide on. And so I really love that kind of aspect because then it also kind of goes to show that every character has something to at least kind of do or to grow, has some type of an arc. Again, I think Denise's arc was probably the best, but I really liked how they showed the marital problems of Denise and Greg because of the fact that they were complete opposites. Greg was more of that hopeful individual, while Denise was the realist, and she had to be the tough parent to let her kids know that, hey, we're gonna get out of this somehow. I just don't know how, right? I'm still trying to figure that out. She even has this like really great moment where after something happens to Greg, which we're going to be talking about, her kids are like talking to her, and you could just see that she is zoned out because she just saw her husband, her loved one, die at the hands of a dinosaur, and she's just walking in the middle of the street. You can barely hear the kids, and then she just completely turns around and erupts on her son Brian, just telling her about what had just happened. And again, just a very intense scene. But then you could see her just turn around and completely notice that, okay, what I just did to Brian, my son, unacceptable. And then, she completely turns around and kind of gives him a hug. It's just those very slight adjustments that Anne Hathaway is able to do on the like, just very quickly. In one moment, be very strong, another moment just explode, and then come back to being the sweet and caring mother that she is. So really love that. But Anne Hathaway is my MVP of The End of Oak Street. Now, I was just talking about Greg, and I mentioned that he ended up dying. First of all, this is actually one of the positives that I have for the movie. This is a slight positive because I actually really dig when movies are not afraid to kill off some of their big name actors that they have. In the movie, Ewan McGregor actually gets eaten by a dinosaur. Now, he's trying to save his wife, and he does all he can, but he ends up getting taken out by a dinosaur. It makes sense. I'm glad that they didn't find another way to have him escape or run away from the dinosaur. No, he got right in front of the dinosaur, tried to hit it with a sledgehammer, and instead he got eaten. Now, that I liked. There was a slight little loophole. They were able to bring him back. I'll explain that a little bit later. But in the scene when he gets eaten, that was actually my favorite scene in the movie. Now, you're going to think, well, Victor, that's messed up, man. Why are you picking your favorite scene of somebody getting eaten by a dinosaur? Let me explain. The reason why it was my favorite scene is because that scene had me laughing out loud in the theater. And it's because it goes back to the same kind of factor that I mentioned at the beginning of the non-spoiler thoughts. That was not meant to be a funny scene. That was meant to be a scene that was just so dark, so messed up because you've been following Greg. Greg's been having trouble with his wife. He's been having trouble with his kids. And he gets taken out. You're supposed to feel for Denise in that moment and the family. And I did not. I laughed. I laughed freaking hard because the scene just sets up Greg in this way where he ends up getting, his leg gets caught in the dinosaur's mouth. The dinosaur pulls him up, drops him down, and it basically already ate a chunk of his leg. But the way that they frame that is that you just see him in agony and pain, and the camera just sticks right on him as he is screaming with his leg sticking out and the bone just bare. And me and my brother, I couldn't believe it. I told him, and even after the movie, we were laughing in the car because of how funny they framed that shot. I don't know why they did it that way, where they just stuck with Greg when he was in pain. They should have moved either to the dinosaur or something else, or to Denise's face when that happened. But instead, they show him getting lifted by the dinosaur. He drops. He doesn't have a leg, and instead of moving away, they stay with Greg and they just show him screaming in pain. And then the dinosaur just drops its head, and it completely starts eating him. So that scene is that was the one that's just stuck out to me because of how hilarious it was. And again, I don't think it was meant to be funny, but I was laughing because of how they just framed that and how they just stuck with Greg. Even though you've already seen his leg get chopped off, you've already seen him screaming in pain, and they stay with him all the way through until the dinosaur comes to eat him. It was just ridiculous. That's why I go back to my statement, which is, it was so ridiculous that might as well just go all the way and make this a full comedy. Make this a hilarious movie, because there was other scenes as well. There was a scene where you have the kids and Denise finding a wormhole, and they have to jump from the top of a house, the roof, to this wormhole. And Brian, the son, ends up jumping and he misses it completely. And the whole theater was laughing. And so, again, don't know if that was on purpose. I think you're supposed to be feeling the actual feelings of, oh no, like, what are they going to do? What if he broke his leg? Instead, I'm just laughing in the theater because Brian just fell from a 2-story building. It's like, oh man, see, those are the aspects. So very weird but that scene of Greg getting taken out by a dinosaur, I thought was just so ridiculous, so out there, but it was just so funny that I had to call it out on the podcast. Am I a weird and a mean person? Maybe because I enjoyed that. I wasn't supposed to enjoy it, but I thought it was hilarious. So that is one of the favorite moments that I had in The End of Oak Street. All right, let's move into a couple of things that just did not work for me. And again, what kind of really brings the movie down a little bit. The first and really the biggest one that I have here is just the writing and the dialogue at times. It feels cheesy. Some of it doesn't work. Some characters are saying such basic things. And I get it. It takes place in, I think, 1982 or in the 80s. But I don't know, something about what the characters are saying sometimes, either the way that they were delivering certain lines or the way that they were saying certain things, just some of it didn't click with me. And when I start noticing those kind of things, it actually starts making me kind of have my mind wander, or, oh, okay, well, I'm ready to see the next scene, or I'm ready to see the dinosaurs, or I'm ready to see action. And that's never something that you want when you're watching a movie. You never want to be taken out by what characters are saying, especially when it comes to this type of a movie where you don't know what the heck is going on. You're just as lost as the characters. The dialogue becomes very important because the family themselves are trying to figure out what the hell are they going to do as a next step. And yeah, it's unfortunate that the lines, the delivery of it felt very cheesy, and it just kind of took me out of the movie. So that was, again, a really big con for me, and why I ended up kind of pushing more for this film that you could probably wait for streaming to watch it. Other than that, though, I only have a couple of other questions, I guess, and these are just questions that I'm not going to try to answer myself, but rather throw out to anybody listening out there, anybody that's out there listening to this podcast. Feel free, if you have an answer, if you have an opinion, drop it in the comments, send me an email. I would love to hear your thoughts. But let's jump into some of the questions, which is, the entire premise of the film is that there is a wormhole that takes this town, this family, to prehistoric times. Now, let me explain what happens at the end. What happens is that Denise, Audrey, and Brian, they lost their father, or Denise lost her husband, and they find a wormhole and they get back to their time. However, for some weird reason, when they come back, they are 15 minutes before the actual wormhole takes the entire town. So I don't know how this kind of time travel worked. They didn't explain that, which again could be another fault of the movie. But essentially, Denise, Audrey, and Brian are back in their town, and what does Denise start doing? Well, she starts calling all of her friends, her loved ones that she knows that are in town, and she basically tries to convince them to leave their house and get out of the town because the town is about to get swallowed up by a wormhole. And one of the things that she does is that she actually calls Greg because again, they are 15 minutes in the past when they get back to the town. And so essentially, Greg and the family are still there before the wormhole takes them. So essentially, what does Denise do? She calls Greg, and he's a pizza delivery man. He ends up getting called for a pizza delivery. He goes, and the plan works. Denise ends up saving Greg from getting taken by the wormhole. What is weird about this, though, is that if they saved Greg, what happened to Denise and the kids that were in the house with Greg when this wormhole got taken? Because if she just saved Greg and their neighbor and somebody else, she basically sent herself and the kids to the prehistoric times. So she basically sacrificed them and allowed them to be taken, and now they just keep the Greg that is not dead anymore. He is from their time, 15 minutes before they got taken. And so it becomes this very weird situation where Denise, Audrey, and Brian basically are allowing themselves in the past to get killed. And so I don't know, like it's a very interesting take. Like what was so weird about that is that they didn't even question like, well, hey, what are we gonna do about, or like Greg when he asks like, what are we gonna do about the people that were in that house? Like I don't know how they're gonna convince Greg that they were in the house and then all of a sudden they were in the rain waiting for him. But that was such a weird way to kind of explain that. So I want to throw the question to you guys. What do you think happened to Denise and the kids? Do you think they're still trapped in the prehistoric island? Do you think they're ever going to come back? Are we going to see doubles? Because again, if we're assuming that Denise, Audrey, and Brian got back to their normal timeline 15 minutes before the actual wormhole, that means that there are two different Denises, two different Audreys and Bryans, but they sent some of them off to the prehistoric time. So I don't know. It feels very weird that they kind of allowed themselves to basically be taken off. And hey, we're just gonna cherry pick Greg because we lost him. And so that was very interesting. The second question is, if you guys have seen the movie, did you see if there was two characters there's a character that gets introduced that is called Jeanette. She actually is lost in the prehistoric times, and Audrey and Brian end up finding her. She's alone. She has no family. They were actually taken by dinosaurs, and so Jeanette ends up joining the Platt family, and she ends up coming back with them in the normal timeline. However, at the end of the movie, I swear there was two Jeanettes. One that was this exact same one that we've been following throughout the movie, but then there's another character that looks exactly like her with her parents. And so I'm wondering, did Jeanette go back to her home and try to save her parents, but in turn end up finding out that there's another character that basically is exactly like her, that looks exactly like her? How did the heck does that happen? So I just wanted to throw that question out to you guys. Did you guys see that there was two Jeanettes? Am I seeing things? I don't know what the heck was going on at the end of the movie, but yeah, that whole wormhole thing was very weird and just it just left so many questions, which is something that just always I guess a detriment to some movies. Whenever you do go full sci-fi, there's always going to be those things that just aren't explained. So those are the things that I kind of left with open questions on my mind. But again, let me know if you had any other questions that you encountered when you watched The End of Oak Street. All right, before we wrap things up, we have one more question. And that question is The End of Oak Street a timeless movie? Now, I really enjoyed Anne Hathaway and her performance. I enjoyed the dinosaurs and how they were represented. I enjoyed the music. But for me, this film is not timeless because of the fact that, the writing, the story overall, the narrative of it, the unexplained aspects of this wormhole, it kind of drags it down just a little bit. And that's unfortunate, right? Because I think it had those types of moments that really stand out. Again, there's hilarious, unintentional, funny moments in this movie that I'm gonna continue to think about and talk about with my brother because that's just something that I'm never gonna forget. Uh, but overall, if the story would have been just a little bit better, if it would have explained a little bit more about the wormholes, I think this would have been just a little bit more of a actual debate in regards to whether it was timeless. But in my opinion, I do not think that The End of Oak Street is a timeless movie. However, who cares what I have to say? I want to hear what all of you that are listening have to say. So, if you have your own opinion, if you know if this film is timeless, well, come to the comments. Drop in the comments and let me know, is The End of Oak Street a timeless movie? What was your favorite scene? Did you think the movie was funny? Should it have been a comedy? Again, let me know all of your thoughts in the comments or in an email, timelessmoviepod@gmail.com. All right, everybody. Appreciate all of you listening to my full thoughts about The End of Oak Street. Make sure to check out our next episode as we cover a new film. We'll talk about it, we'll give our honest thoughts, and then we'll decide if it is timeless. All right, everybody. Appreciate you all listening. Have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you all later.